Hello, and welcome back to my channel. I'm Sam Zagar. Things might look a little different today. The video quality might look different, and the audio quality might be sounding a little different. I'm playing with a new microphone, but this whole conversation is kind of about talking, acoustics, frequency. Really, what this conversation is going to be about is an experiment. I'm a conscious 3 profile. I'm a 3/6 profile, but the third line is the conscious side of me, which means as far as my mind is concerned, I'm here to experiment. I'm here for a trial and error process. Now, one of the things that is very clearly trial and error for me is deconditioning my undefined throat center. Now, the other thing that might sound a little bit different is my voice. I have been low-key sick for the last 2 weeks. I haven't really been recording. I've been trying to rest my voice quite a bit from its performance speaking, which is what I call this. My recording right now is a performative speaking. The question of how much should I really speak, point blank period, is something I wonder. How much should I talk? When is the appropriate time to talk? When's the true self time to talk? I have an undefined throat. I'm a projector. This conversation is likely going to be more relevant for people who have undefined throats. If you're a reflector, you absolutely have an undefined throat. But if you're a projector, only some types of projectors have undefined throats. Other projectors have defined throats, such as the self-projected projector. If you're a manifesting generator, we know that that is motor to throat and you have a defined throat, and this is likely not that big of a problem for you. Or if you're a manifester, we know again that there's a motor to throat component. This might not be that much of a problem for you. But if you're like me and you have an undefined throat, or you just have an unconscious throat, or maybe you have an unconscious throat that is a split definition from what your actual authority is. There's so many different ways that somebody can experience a variation of throat center conditioning. It doesn't just have to be undefined. But the way that I approached this is through the awareness of my own design. I am an undefined throat. And as I develop a sickness that makes my voice sound kind of like a frog that's developed a smoking habit, I ask myself, did I do this to myself? Maybe. If I didn't want to do this to myself again, should I be doing something differently? This is the third line way. I'm wondering, should I try this? Should I try this? What about this? Does this work? Does this not work? So I consistently approach human design through the lens of this is an experiment, and more intentionally, this is my experiment. My human design experiment is my experiment. It's up to me to run it, to test it, to play with it, to observe it, to look at the results. Your design is your experiment. You get to play with it. You get to test it. I can teach you about mechanics. I can teach you about things that are correct. But what does it actually feel like for you to play with it? What does it feel like for you to experiment with it? What does it feel like for you to test it? What's your experience of things? And so, one of the things that I said recently online was that I was considering going silent. How long would it last? What would it feel like? The joke is the day that I made that post, I was in bed, quiet by myself for the next couple of hours. And as soon as I walked into the room with the manifester, I was like, good morning, blah, 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 blah. And 10 minutes into conversation, I went, ah, I already messed up. I already failed. That was the first thought. I already failed. I expect to fail as a third line. Failure is part of how I get my results. I'm not going to come on here and be like, this is what you need to do with an undefined throat. This is what you need to do with a defined throat. This is your experiment. But I'm here to offer a little bit of suggestive advice about how to play with the experiment, how to test things, what to observe, what to pay attention to. I'm designing experiments for myself all the time because I want to play with different pieces of human design information. I want to play with my deconditioning. Ra says that if there's a flaw in human design, the third lines will find it because we're here to find what doesn't work. I have not found too much in human design that doesn't work yet. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit of a personal story. I'm in a relationship with a manifester. So, right off the bat, we know that this is someone who has motor to throat definition. This is someone who has a defined throat, who is a natural speaker. He's a very perceptive person, like a very, very perceptive person. And throughout the course of our on again, off again 6-year relationship, he has made certain observations about me. And I did not receive them very well in the beginning. But through my understanding of human design, I would recognize that there were certain observations that he was making about me that turned out to be fairly mechanically accurate. Now, one of the things that he has called out in me for an extended period of time is the fact that my voice changes. My voice changes all the time, but why? And when and how? Like, what is it that's changing my voice? Now, I appreciate the fact that one of the things that the manifestor has said to me is that he doesn't believe that this is a conscious habit of mine. That the conscious and unconscious is so important to consider within human design because you were only truly conscious of the personality side of your design. You were not conscious with the design side of your body graph. We resonate to things that belong to the personality, that belong to the mind. We don't really resonate or recognize to the things that are unconscious in us. So when he says to me, "Why do you change your voice so much?" If this is truly an unconscious quality in me, I'm going, what do you mean I change my voice a lot? Like, I'm not necessarily aware that that's something that I'm doing. And we've had enough conversations about this over the years, and he's met my mom, he's met my dad, he's heard how both of these people talk, he's heard how the people that raised me speak, enunciate, express certain things. I can see conditioned qualities that I've gotten from both of my parents. For example, my mom is a generator, undefined throat, and she's in sales. My mom has multiple sales voices that I can identify very quickly. I used to call my mom at work, and if she didn't want the people at work to know that she was on a personal call with her daughter, she would change her voice and start talking to me as if I was a sales call. And so I would play along with it because as soon as she changed her voice, I would recognize, oh, we're supposed to role play that I'm a client right now so she doesn't get in trouble at work. But these are very early conditioning things for me, to the point where I developed what I called, like, my customer service voice, my old people voice, like, how to speak to someone that you maybe respect or look up to. Like, I learned how to be a little bit more demure or less cussing or but then I also have, like, the bro side of my voice that would come out, and it's like it's very low, and it's like there were ways in which I was always changing my frequency, my acoustic quality, and it's like, what's the word here? It wasn't so that I could fit in quite. There was a performative quality. One of the things that I think is really significant about my upbringing is that my parents were not together. My parents remarried multiple times. They're younger. Their parents are younger. So I not only had many parents and step parents, I had many grandparents and step grandparents, and there was split custody. So no matter where I was as a little kid, there were different rules and expectations on me. There were just different expectations for how I was going to behave, what behavior was required of me. Now I'm an undefined G center, but I do have gate 10 defined. So there is some level of like me in my behavior, but also not really, and it's inconsistent. And so I had a tendency to act in ways that wouldn't get me in trouble, as in follow the rules of each person, follow the rules of each household to avoid consequence or punishment. Now you gotta hear that and go, "This girl did not have her own authority." At no point in my young years was I raised to, like, genuinely believe that I actually had my own authority. I was raised with a survival strategy of behave the way that the person in front of you expects you to, and there won't be consequences. And I also had a family that had some physical consequences, right? So there are many things that I was looking to avoid, so I developed my own survival strategies. It really makes me wanna, like, totally break down and just sob when I get called out for the fact that my voice is changing and it comes across as manipulative and performative because it is unconscious, but it's totally a survival strategy that I adopted. But I don't want to keep it. Like, as soon as I look at it, like, it starts to lose its power, right? So my manifestor cares about me. That's one of the most important things that I have to acknowledge, right? Like, I don't have someone who's just criticizing my voice because they don't like me or because they're critical or because they're a jerk or anything like that. I have someone who's aware, someone who's acknowledging something, someone who's observing something, and they're trying to make me aware of it too, but from a curious place. So the manifestor has a first line mind. He's a 1-3 profile. He's very curious. He asks a lot of questions. And so there's this question of like, why do you do this? Where does this come from? Do you know that you do this? But the most recognizing statement that came from him was, I don't think that you're aware that you do this. And I think it exhausts you. He said, I think it takes so much energy out of you to try and perform for each person without even realizing that that's what you're doing. And so I went more contemplative, more aware. The first thing I wanted to do, obviously, was talk less because I wanted to see what would happen. It wasn't just like, oh, he told me to talk less. He didn't tell me to do that. He asked me questions about why I talk the way that I did. And so rather than hear it as like I'm being rejected or someone doesn't like me or someone's criticizing me and going into like pouty, victimy, whatever kind of low self-worth role, that's not how I want to handle this. I have a willingness, ego, divine ego. I have a willingness, third line, to experiment, to try, to play, to see if something's going to work out, to see if I can do something better than I've been doing it previously. So one of the things I started to do was before I would say something, I'd try and acknowledge what was happening here. And, the first uncomfortable thing was that I realized most of what I said wasn't just stuff that came out of my mouth. It was stuff that went through the mind and then out of the mouth. I thought about how to say something. I thought about how it would affect somebody else to hear that. There's still, truly, a manipulative, performative quality to that. It's not like a terrible thing for the other person, but it's not a benefit for either of us, and it's not true. It's not the truth. So one of the first things I started to do was look at what was about to come out of my mouth, and I tried to categorize it a little bit. Now, obviously, I have a strategic mind. I am very good at compartmentalizing certain things. So as things were gonna come out of me, I realized maybe some of these things are space fillers, okay? Maybe some of these things are trying to attract attention, okay? Maybe some things are just my thoughts coming out of my mouth and I haven't realized that. Maybe some of these things are just observations. And then I ask myself, like, what bothers me about things that other people say or share? And I'm not talking about like the opinions or beliefs they have. I'm like the actual noise that they broadcast. Like, what irritates me about that? And I don't really like listening to people like run their inner commentary, like their thoughts out of their brain. It's actually one of the most exhausting things I experience is listening to my son, Maven. He's an MG. He's a 10-year-old pure MG. He talks very loud. He talks very fast. And he talks about nothing important most of the time. A lot of the times he's just talking to himself. But I was of the belief that everything that he said needed to be engaged with so that he felt important and significant and valid. But then half the stuff that he's saying is just like his thoughts coming out. He walks into the room, like he literally will just walk into the living room and be like, hi. And I'm like, what? Hi? Like, you live here. I live here. We're all home. Like, why are we saying hi to each other? Like, there's a lot of unnecessary conversation that happens. And simultaneously, I believe that there is so much unnecessary conversation that happens. And there's not enough necessary conversation that happens. I mean, that's a solar plexus thing. Truth and confrontation. There's so many people avoiding truth and confrontation. There are so many people filling space with unnecessary frequency, and they're avoiding filling space with really the necessary frequency, which is truth and confrontation. So, as I've been talking to the manifester, as I've been a YouTuber, as I've been teaching courses, as I have been sick, as I have been questioning so many things about my voice. Oh, I laugh because I have a phrase that I say often in sessions. I say it absolutely to projectors more than anybody else. But the phrase is speak when spoken to. Do you speak when spoken to? And that's an interesting thing because it's not like I'm actually telling people, like, don't talk until someone else talks to you, or like, I was told as a kid, speak when spoken to, in a way that was meant to, like, shut me up. Speak when spoken to, when you say that to people, it's kind of like saying, like, I don't want to hear from you unless, I deem that you have something worthy to say. Like, there's a lot about the sentiment speak when spoken to that's like, ugh, that feels like crap. There are people that are going to hear me say that and they're going to be immediately put off by that. But I want you to hear, like, this is an extreme example for a reason. I tend to go pretty hard on certain things because I want to know what works and what doesn't work. And so this concept of speak when spoken to, when I use that as like a general rule of thumb for me, and don't get me wrong, I don't actually follow this. I wish I did. I'm not good at this. I'm working on getting better at this. But if I only spoke when spoken to, I wouldn't be initiating conversations. I wouldn't be giving unnecessary guidance. But there is this kind of like, there's a bit of a response thing in that doesn't necessarily work for me either. But loosely, if I think about not speaking unless someone requires me to, unless someone is inviting me to, unless there's something natural to contribute to the conversation, I got to look at whether or not I'm just not self, filling space, looking for attention. So I've been focusing on a couple talk less experiments because, when I said I think I'm going to try going silent, like, I should have known right off the bat that that in itself is too extreme for me. I was never going to be able to pull that off. But one of the ways that I have been able to start this is by going, am I thinking out loud? All right, keep it in. Is this the answer to the question I've been asked, or is this significantly more information than I was asked for? All right, maybe keep it in. Is this me saying something because it's been too silent for too long and I feel awkward or uncomfortable? All right, maybe keep it in. Is this me responding to things like a pretend generator? All right, maybe keep it in. I don't have to talk that much. Truly, I don't need to talk that much. I don't know what it is in my brain that told me I needed to talk as much as I've talked throughout my whole life. If I think about, like, not talking in a situation, the anxiety that I get from that is like, well, other people won't know what's going on inside of me. Other people won't know things about me. Other people, like, so maybe they don't need to. I am enjoying actively playing with deconditioning the throat center. I will say the thing I really wanted to play with the most was if I kept most of my voice to myself, unless invited and compensated, unless it was just so automatic that it totally bypassed the mind and it was so natural for it to come out. Like, if I only speak at those times, I want to know what's going to change in my life. I specifically want to know what's going to change for my type, projector, therefore my signature, success, my not self theme, bitterness. Part of what I want to know is, will people be either more attracted to me or more comfortable around me? And attracted isn't like physically or sexually, it's like drawn to, which for me is part of the comfort thing. Like, people are drawn to places where they feel good, comfortable, regulated. Is there a way in which I'm going to become more true self that is going to make everyone around me feel better, feel more comfortable, feel more regulated? Is it going to result in more invitations for me? Is it going to result in more energy for me? Am I going to sleep better? Am I going to perform better? I don't know. But so far, I can say that the less I talk, the better the day's been. And it's not just to say it's about talking less. It's about being more intentional. It's truly not about less. It's about intention. Am I using my voice with intention? And for most of my life, I haven't been. I don't know about your situation. I don't know if you have a defined throat or an undefined throat or a conscious throat or an unconscious throat. I don't know if you talk too much or too little. I don't know if you're in your signature or you're not self-theme, but maybe you want to try an experiment. Maybe you want to play with a couple of things. Maybe you want to try something out, see how it goes. Maybe not. Either way, choice is yours. See you next time.